For 40 years, my husband went to the bank every Thursday night. I never thought much of it, just bank errands, he'd say, always so casual about it. I trusted him completely. After all, we had a life together, one built on love, compromise, and the quiet routine that comes with being married for decades. But after his sudden death, when I was left alone to pick up the pieces of what I thought was a perfect life, I found something I was never meant to see. Bank statements, dozens of them, showing weekly withdrawals every Thursday for the last 40 years. It was never much, just a few $100s here and there, but it added up, over $780,000. And as I looked at the records, a cold feeling washed over me. What was he doing with that money? Why didn't I know about this account? The more I thought about it, the more the questions gnawed at me. So I did what any wife would do in that situation. I went to the bank. But what I uncovered wasn't just money. It was a secret, buried for years, and it would change everything I thought I knew about my husband, about my marriage, and about myself. The truth wasn't just shocking. It was paralyzing. If you want to know how this twisted story unfolds, make sure to subscribe and stick around. You're not going to want to miss this. I spent hours going through Robert's things, going through everything to make sense of the sudden silence left in our house. There was no warning, no goodbyes, just a phone call that I couldn't ignore. That's when I found the bank records. It wasn't just one or two statements. I found decades of them, $200 to $500 every Thursday for 40 years. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Every single week, without fail, Robert went to the bank. I never questioned it. He always said he had bank errands, and I trusted him. But as I looked at the numbers, something inside me started to twist. Why didn't I know about this account? What was he doing with all that money? Was this a secret life I didn't know about? My stomach dropped as I realized I didn't know my husband as well as I thought. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself I must be overthinking. But the more I looked, the more the pieces didn't fit. The withdrawals started years before our marriage, before everything. It didn't make sense. There had to be an explanation. So I made the decision. I was going to the bank where Robert went every Thursday for 4 decades. I needed to know. I walked into First National Bank the next morning. The air inside was cold, sterile, and distant. I approached the teller and she seemed pleasant enough. But when I mentioned Robert's name, her demeanor changed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't give out any information without proper authorization," she said, her voice too rehearsed. "I have his death certificate," I replied, pushing it toward her. She hesitated, then glanced at her computer screen, typing something fast. Moments later, a manager emerged from the back. He was tall, middle-aged, with graying hair and an unsettling look in his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice tight. I didn't miss the way he looked at me. "I need to see the records for Robert Hutchinson. There's an account I need to know about." He stiffened. "I'm afraid I can't discuss personal account details." The more I pressed, the more the manager's discomfort grew. Finally, I told him everything. The withdrawals, the years of secrecy. His face paled. He glanced at the bank's security policy hanging on the wall as if it would give him an excuse. "We're not authorized to release those details," he said again, but this time there was a crack in his voice. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. "Please," I said, my voice shaking. "I need answers." He didn't respond immediately. He just turned and walked to the back office. After a few tense moments, he returned, holding a stack of documents. "We'll release this to you under specific conditions," he muttered. As I looked at the papers, I could barely breathe. The bank records showed the money had been transferred into a separate account, an account I never knew existed. It was emptied 3 weeks before Robert died. The chill I felt wasn't from the air. It was from the sudden realization that I wasn't just facing a simple mistake. Robert's life wasn't what I thought. I stood there, stunned, the truth still sinking in. But the most unsettling part was yet to come. The bank's security footage revealed something even more shocking. Robert hadn't just gone there to withdraw money. Every Thursday he met with someone I didn't know, and that person wasn't me. The footage showed a woman, someone in her late 50s, sitting with Robert in a private room for years. That's when I knew. The truth was about to break wide open, and it was going to hurt more than I ever imagined. I drove to First National Bank the next day, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The manager's face from yesterday still haunted me. I wasn't going to leave until I had answers. I walked straight up to the counter, the same teller from before. She looked at me nervously, but I wasn't backing down. "I need to speak with the manager again," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Minutes later, he appeared, Mr. Gerard Phillips. "What's this about, ma'am?" he asked, his eyes darting nervously around the bank. "I'm here to get the records for Robert Hutchinson," I said. "I want to know about the account he had here, the one with all the withdrawals." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, avoiding my gaze. "We've already talked about this, ma'am. I can't give you any more information." I didn't let him off the hook. "I have his death certificate. You can't keep hiding the truth." The words hit him like a slap, and I could see him falter. He hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. "All right, but we're doing this under very specific conditions," he said, his voice tight. I waited as he disappeared behind the office door, then returned a few minutes later with a thick envelope. He handed it to me without a word, and I grabbed it, my pulse racing. When I opened it, my breath caught. The account Robert had been making those weekly withdrawals from, he'd been depositing money into it for years. But here's the kicker. It was emptied 3 weeks before his death. The truth hit me like a hammer. I wasn't just looking at money. I was looking at something bigger, something I wasn't ready to face. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when I saw the security footage. It showed Robert every Thursday meeting with the same woman, a woman I didn't know. It wasn't just 1 or 2 times. It was every week. I stared at the screen, my mind racing as the woman appeared, Veronica Shaw. She wasn't just any woman. She looked like she belonged in a world I didn't understand. She had an air of cold elegance, a sharp contrast to everything I knew about Robert. My hands were shaking as I watched them talk, sitting together in a private room. I knew then, whatever this was, it wasn't just some casual friendship. This was something deeper, something Robert had kept hidden from me for decades. I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. What was going on here? Why didn't I know about her? After hours of trying to calm myself, I found Veronica's address, and I drove straight to her house. I needed answers. When I knocked, she answered immediately, as though she'd been expecting me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth, controlled. "I know who you are, and I know what you've been doing with my husband," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't flinch. "Robert?" she asked, almost bored. "Yes," I snapped. "What the hell is going on? You've been meeting with him for years. What's the truth?" She looked at me for a moment, then spoke calmly, almost too calmly. "He and I were in love for decades, Diane. But he stayed with you, didn't he? He stayed because of the pregnancy. He didn't want to leave you when he found out about the baby, but he had to keep me on the side." Her words pierced through me, like cold needles. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Love? How could this be love? "I didn't know," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. Veronica's expression was one of pure indifference. "He didn't want you to know, but he also couldn't let me go." I stared at her, my mind racing. The lies, the deceit. It was all too much. The woman who had been living in the shadows of my marriage. And Robert? He wasn't the man I thought he was. My world was falling apart. "I loved him," she continued, almost smugly, "but I wasn't the one he married. He was mine too, Diane. He just didn't have the courage to be honest with either of us." As the words sank in, I felt the weight of everything I thought I knew about my life crumble. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? Before I could process it all, Veronica's cold voice hit me again. I've been with him for more than just the last few years, and now you're going to have to deal with the truth. The words echoed in my mind. Was this real? Was Robert's life just a series of secrets I never even knew about? The devastation hit me like a wrecking ball, but that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Veronica stepped aside as I entered her home, the same cold, indifferent look on her face that I had seen earlier. As I stood in her living room, she gestured for me to sit. "You want the truth, Diane?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a stack of photos. "These are from the years Robert and I spent together." She flipped through the images, one by one. There they were, Robert and Veronica, looking so carefree, so happy. They were at restaurants, on vacations, even lounging on a beach. She handed them to me, and my hands shook as I touched the pictures. Every moment I had thought was real. Every family memory we shared now seemed like a lie. But there was something wrong with this picture. It was too perfect, too staged. "You see," Veronica said, as if it was all so simple. "He was with me, Diane. We were in love. I think you knew, deep down." My mind reeled, the pieces not fitting. The affair, as painful as it was to consider, didn't match up with what I thought I knew. The photos were from years before our marriage, long before we had met. My stomach twisted as I stared at the timeline. Why didn't I notice the discrepancies before? Robert had always said he was busy with work, but now I could see the truth hidden in these photos. Robert had been living another life. "This isn't adding up," I whispered to myself. Something was off. This affair couldn't be the whole story. There was more here. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. I needed to know everything about Robert's past. I began searching through his old things, the boxes of forgotten memories, the letters tucked away in his childhood home. One letter, in particular, caught my eye. It was dated just after our wedding, and the words on the page seemed to pull me into a new world of uncertainty. "I'll never forgive myself for what happened that night," Robert had written. "The accident with Christine. The guilt won't ever leave me." My heart stopped. Christine. Veronica's sister. The one Robert never mentioned. The pieces were finally starting to click into place. Robert had been hiding something far darker than an affair. He had killed Veronica's sister in a hit-and-run accident years ago. The weight of it hit me hard. Robert had kept it from me, from everyone. I searched the rest of the box and then I found it, a small metal key engraved with a number, the key to a safety deposit box, a hidden part of Robert's life, one that had been locked away from me for decades. I took the key to the bank the next morning. My hands were shaking as I walked up to the teller. I requested access to the box, and after what felt like an eternity, the bank manager handed it to me. Inside were more letters and a journal, Robert's journal. I flipped through the pages, and there, in black ink, was Robert's confession. The hit and run wasn't an accident as he had told me. It was intentional. He had hit Christine Shaw, left her to die, and then spent the rest of his life under Veronica's control. The worst part? Veronica had known the whole time. She wasn't just an affair partner. She was a blackmailer. And she had been using Robert's guilt against him for years, making him pay for his crime. "She made me do it," Robert had written in the journal. "I had no choice. I couldn't tell you, Diane. You wouldn't have understood." My stomach turned as the truth settled in. Robert hadn't been the man I thought he was. He had been a victim of his own choices, trapped by his past, living in constant fear of Veronica's blackmail. Veronica wasn't just some woman in the background of our lives. She was the one pulling the strings. She had manipulated him for decades. I stood there, holding the journal in my hands, feeling the full weight of everything I had learned. This was no affair. This was a game of control, a twisted cycle of guilt, revenge, and blackmail. The man I loved had been a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game. The more I learned, the more my heart broke. Every answer I uncovered only led to more questions, more pain. I had spent years with Robert believing we were partners, that our lives were shared in honesty. But now, standing in the wreckage of everything I thought I knew, I couldn't escape the truth. Robert hadn't just lied to me, he had betrayed me in a way I couldn't comprehend. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, was not the person I had thought him to be. He wasn't just a victim of Veronica's blackmail. He was a perpetrator of a crime that had destroyed everything. The money, all those withdrawals, wasn't for an affair. It was for the cover-up. It was Robert paying for his guilt, paying for his crime, and I had unknowingly been complicit in the destruction of our family. It wasn't just my heart that had been shattered. It was everything. The life savings we had built together, the future I had planned for us, gone. That money, those withdrawals, had been the price Robert paid to keep his dark secret from me. All these years, I had been living in a lie, thinking the worst thing was an affair. But it wasn't an affair at all. It was a payment for a murder. My stomach churned as I realized the full extent of Robert's deception, all the sacrifices I had made, all the love I had given him. It had been built on a foundation of lies. And then I found the final payment, the last one, the one made just weeks before Robert's death. It was the largest withdrawal he had ever made, and it wasn't for any reason I could understand. I pulled the bank statement from the file and felt my breath catch in my throat. The payment had been made directly to Veronica. It was as if Robert had been paying her off to keep his secret buried, even in the final days of his life. I had no words. I was numb, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to confront Veronica again. I couldn't let this go. I had to know everything, even if it destroyed me. The confrontation was inevitable. I walked into her house, my hands shaking. Veronica looked at me as if she had been expecting this moment. "You came back," she said, almost with a smile. "You should have stayed away, Diane. It's all over now." I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck in my throat. "Why, Veronica?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do this? Why did you ruin everything?" Veronica didn't even flinch. "You were always in the way. You never understood, Diane. Robert was mine long before he was yours, and I made sure he knew that every single day. I had him trapped, and you never knew." Her words were like daggers, each one piercing deeper than the last. "You ruined me, Veronica," I said, barely able to breathe. "You took everything from me." She stepped closer, her voice cold and triumphant. "No, Diane, you were just too blind to see it. I never wanted to hurt you, but I wanted to make sure Robert paid, and he did, every single week for 40 years. My emotions exploded, a rush of rage, disbelief, and grief. I lashed out, pushing her back, the anger I had been holding in for so long finally breaking free. But Veronica didn't fight back. She just stared at me, cold and unmoving, her eyes full of contempt. "You think this changes anything? It's over now, Diane. You can't undo what's been done." I stared at her, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My life, my family, my marriage, it was all built on lies. And the worst part? Robert had been the one who set it all in motion. I realized that I had no one left to trust. My husband had betrayed me, and the woman who had orchestrated it all was standing right in front of me, unrepentant. The truth was more than I could bear. I stood at the edge, teetering between what I knew I should do and what I feared would destroy everything. The truth was too much for one person to carry. Robert's crime, his betrayal, and now Veronica's involvement, It all felt like a weight too heavy for my shoulders. I could expose everything. I could go to the police, bring Veronica to justice, and finally uncover Robert's secrets to the world. I could end the suffering, but at what cost? The family I had fought so hard to protect would be torn apart. My son, David. How would he handle the truth? How would he react to knowing that his father was a murderer? The thought of destroying his future, of having him carry the burden of Robert's dark past, it paralyzed me. Could I expose Robert's crime and ruin everything for David? Could I live with the guilt of destroying my own son's legacy? Or should I bury it all, just let the past die with Robert? But then, just when I thought I had decided, the truth hit me harder than anything before. It wasn't just Robert and Veronica who had been keeping secrets from me. David, my own son, had known all along. He knew about his father's crime, and he had helped cover it up. I found out when I went through Robert's old things one more time, searching for answers. There, in the back of a drawer, was a letter, handwritten by David to his father. It was dated 3 weeks before Robert's death. The words burned in my chest. "Dad, I don't want Mom to know. I can't let her live with the truth. You've done enough. I'll help you hide it. We're in this together." I couldn't breathe. David had known. My son had helped keep the secret, helped shield me from the truth. All these years I had trusted him, and now I was looking at the shattered pieces of my family. I didn't know how to move forward, how to face David after learning this. When I confronted him, his face twisted in guilt. "Mom, I didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was protecting you. I never wanted you to suffer like this. You deserve to have a good life, not the truth about what Dad did." The words felt like a punch to the stomach. He was complicit. My son had been hiding the truth, just like Robert had. I stood there, unable to speak. All these years of raising him, of guiding him, and now I was facing the reality that my own flesh and blood had been keeping secrets that destroyed everything. "How could you, David?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. "How could you lie to me like this? How could you protect him, knowing what he did?" He didn't answer, his eyes filled with shame. I realized in that moment that my world was no longer the one I thought I knew. My husband, my son, they had both betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. The trust I had in them was gone, and I was left standing in the wreckage of a family built on lies. The weight of it all crushed me. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to make a choice, and whatever I decided, nothing would ever be the same. The decision weighed on me like a leaden cloud. I had spent days, weeks even, turning over every piece of information, every conversation, every lie. But in the end, there was only one choice that would give me peace, exposing the truth. I knew it would ruin everything. My son, my family, my life. It would all come crashing down, but I couldn't live with the knowledge that Robert's crime, his betrayal, would die with me. I walked into the police station that afternoon, my heart pounding in my chest. The officer at the desk looked up as I approached, her expression neutral. "How can I help you?" she asked. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "I need to report a crime, a hit and run that happened decades ago." I told her everything. About Robert, about the blackmail, about the secret life he had been living. She took my statement, asked questions, but it all felt like a blur. I wasn't even sure if I had done the right thing. As I walked out of the station, I felt numb. I had done what I thought was right, but the cost was unbearable. How could I look David in the eye again? How could I tell him that his father was a murderer? That everything he had known, everything he had trusted, was a lie. The weight of that knowledge crushed me, and I found myself questioning everything I had ever believed in. Was it worth it? To expose the truth, to bring justice if it meant tearing apart the fabric of my family, my marriage, my relationship with my son? It was all built on lies, on secrets that I could no longer ignore. But now that I knew the truth, I couldn't turn back. I felt paralyzed, emotionally and mentally drained. I had done the right thing, but it didn't feel like justice. It didn't feel like peace. In the end, I realized that knowing the truth didn't set me free. It only trapped me in a prison of my own making. The consequences were too much to bear. As I sat alone in my empty house that night, I wondered if I had made the right choice. I had exposed Robert's crime to the world, but I had also destroyed my family in the process. Justice, it seemed, didn't always bring peace. It didn't always bring closure. It just left you with more questions, more pain. And as I sat there in the quiet, I wondered if I could ever truly heal from this. Could I ever forgive myself for what I had done? Could I ever forgive Robert or David or even Veronica? Or would I forever be trapped in the fallout of the choices I had made? The answers were nowhere to be found. Only silence. I returned home that night, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The silence in the house was deafening. I hadn't expected anything. No more revelations, no more secrets. But as I stepped inside, something caught my eye. A single piece of paper, neatly folded, lay on the kitchen counter. My heart skipped as I walked over and unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Veronica's. The note read, "You think it's over, Diane? You think you've won? I still have copies of everything, and now I have nothing left to lose. See you Thursday." My hands trembled as I read the words again, each one sinking in deeper than the last. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't given up. The war wasn't over. I stood there, frozen. How could this be happening? I had exposed the truth. I had gone to the police, confronted Veronica, and torn my world apart. I had done everything I thought I needed to do to finally be free. But now, with this note in my hands, I realized the full cost of what I had done. Veronica wasn't just a woman from Robert's past. She was a force, relentless and unforgiving, and she wasn't finished with me yet. My life, my family, my future, they were all gone. In trying to expose the truth, I had destroyed everything that had ever mattered to me. The betrayal from Robert, the lies, the deceit, and the blackmail, they had paralyzed me emotionally. I had spent decades trusting the wrong people. And now, as I stood in my empty house, I wondered, could I ever escape this? Could I ever truly heal from the devastation that had consumed me? Or was I forever trapped in the shadow of this betrayal? The truth had set me free, but it had also left me with nothing. Nothing but the haunting words on the note and the knowledge that the damage was far from over. Could I ever rebuild my life? Could I find peace again? Or would I always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next bombshell to drop? As I sat in the dark, lost in thought, I couldn't help but ask myself, could Diane ever truly escape the shadow of this betrayal? The cost of revenge, of uncovering long-buried secrets, had been higher than I could have ever imagined. Maybe some truths are too painful to bear. Maybe some lies, no matter how dark, are better left uncovered. What do you think? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, subscribe to stay updated on more stories like this.